So in this video we'll be talking about the macro language and the way that macros function in the myCNC software. So first of all, what does a macro command look like? Well, it will look something like this right here. It's a very simple M code typically, which you summon from your G-code program. Let's go over the basics of the macro language to see how we can write one. So first of all, you can have variables within your macro, and that variable will be denoted by your hashtag or your pound key right here, and they will have some sort of a number assigned to them. However, all variables with numbers higher than 1000 are considered to be the global system variables, and while it's possible to read and write two global variables, the user should understand that doing so may change the system behavior. A number of those variables are reserved, so changing their values is typically not recommended. However, the variables in the range from 1 to 999 are user space variables, and these variables are not changed by CNC control, and modifying these variables will not affect the way your system operates. So these are typically a good choice in cases where you'd like to use them as a sort of a temporary variable within a macro. Next, to utilize them, you have a number of symbols and operators, such as your equality symbol to assign a value to this variable, and we will be seeing an example of all of this at a later point in this video. Next you have your typical addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. And you also have the rem modulus operator, which is your remainder, and the mod operator, which is the quotient. Then you also have the logic operators, such as your typical greater than, greater or equal than, less than, and less or equal than. So GT, GE, LT, and LE logic operators. And you also can utilize square brackets that are used to change operation priority. Last but not least, you also have a very useful tool in the goTo command, which will automatically move to a certain line in your macro, and you can also use them with if statements. So for example, if a condition is met, go to 300. This will, in our example, go to line 300. Next, let's go into our myCNC settings and see the way that the macros list operates. myCNC has a built-in macros list editor for creating and editing macros, which you can find by heading into your settings, configuration, macro list. And here you have an interface to aid you in creation of these new macros. This button will add a new macro, this one will save changes in it, and this one will delete the selected macro. The button in the top right will save your configuration settings. Next, we'll be going over a very common or very commonly used macro procedure, which is your tool change macro M6, to see how all this comes together in practice. So here you can see the M6 macro, and first of all it is important to confirm that the tool change M6 macro, due to its somewhat special status, is actually enabled. To do that, we can go into our G-code settings and head into this section right here, which is the tool change M6TXX. Make sure it is enabled, and if it isn't, enable it and save your configuration. Next, we can take a look at the way you would actually write out such a command in your G-code program, and here we have a typical example. So you would write out something along the lines of M6 T2 to switch your tool number to tool number 2, or in our case, a tangential knife. It is important to note here that all of your commands from T1 to T99 are defined as macros in the myCNC software. And these macros, if we go back to the macro list, typically consist of just the one line, which sets up the global variable 5409, which is your next tool number. So for example here, for T2, you would have G10, L80, P5409, Q2. And the priority of operations is such that T codes have a higher priority in myCNC than M codes. So for a command such as M6 T2, you would have your T2 command being executed first, and then the M6 executed second. Now that we know this, we can head back to M6 and try to change it a little bit to see how it can be done. So here, for example, I would like to add some sort of a command to my macro to toggle or perhaps turn on an output when I'm switching to a particular tool. Perhaps simply as an indicator, perhaps it is some sort of a pneumatic air setup, or something along those lines. Whatever the case, we can easily modify this M6 macro to suit our needs a little better. So first of all, let's say I'd like to use output number 7 for my tool number 4, which is my pen. So whenever I am at tool number 4, or rather I switch to tool number 4, I would like to enable output number 7. So here I have a very convenient PLC, which is my M62 and M63 set of PLCs. And all they do is they enable or disable a certain output port, and the number of that output port depends on the EPRAM value that is sent to the PLC along with the PLC number. So for example, to enable port 1, we would write something along the lines of M62 P1, and to disable it, we'd write M62, or rather M63 P1. Here, again, it is clearly seen that we can summon or run PLC commands from within our macro. So we can embed a certain PLC command and run it from within our M6. It is not the other way around. You cannot do it in the opposite manner where you summon a macro command from a PLC. So macro commands have that unique and very useful advantage here. So here, let's say, first of all, at the very start of my PLC, I would like to make sure that I have an output that is disabled, so M63 P7, to make sure that the output is off prior to any change taking place. Then we can see that we have this N100, N200, N300, etc. signifier right here. That will be our block of code, so N300 is the one we're interested in for tool 4 pen. And we can see that if N, for example, 300 is run, that will be because of this condition right here, which jumps straight to it. So here we can enter a line that effectively says M62 P7 to run a PLC command in this block of code. And then after our tool switch is done, we will effectively go to line number 2000, and this will end our program. After we've done our changes, we can press the Save PLC button, and we can head back to the main screen to try and run such a modified PLC. So here, let's type in M6T2, just to switch to tool number 2. We can see that our output number 7 is off in our diagnostics window. Next, we'll switch to T4 by typing in M6T4, and we can now see that tool number 4 is active and output number 7 has lit up, meaning that it is currently on. So I hope this covers the basics and the very basic example of the M6 macro. For all other information and for more examples of the modified M6 macro, for example for your lathe setups or for your lift-controlled pneumatics, etc., you can head over to the myCNC documentation at docs.pvautomation.com. Thank you for watching.